year we're targeting 77%, so we are going to cover the actions that we're putting in place to improve that, deal with issues relating to infrastructure, as well as issues relating to LTSM. The marking of the examination scripts is expected to resume from the 26th of June to the 13th of July 2022. That is for supplementary national senior certificate examinations that are currently taking place now. The target for the release of results is the 3rd of August for those supplementary results. The provincial June common examination is administered in 935 high schools in the province. However, this is optional, especially to those schools that are performing above 75%. We have decided to have this common exam so that to check the levels at which our learners are and their state of readiness for the final examination at the end of the year. But those schools that are already performing at a higher level, they can opt out of the common examination and have their own. But I think majority of the schools in the province have opted for this common examination. This issue of partnering was informed by the inevitable need to supplement normal tuition done in our schools with extended or extra classes. The focus on this is on quintile 1 to quintile 3. This is we are doing this in an effort to support parents who cannot afford the price of extra tuition. Other parents, especially in areas like your Queenstown, your Port Elizabeth, or Gqeberha, your East London, your Mthatha, with the concentration of either former model schools and bigger performing schools. In those areas, there are also additional providers of additional tuition in a number of ways. For instance, here we have those service providers that are providing maths and science additional tuition, but it depends on that parent, the affordability of that on the part of the parent, and a number of quintile 1 to quintile 3 parents cannot afford those on their own. That's the reason why we are having these partnerships, to ensure that those parents who cannot afford to mobilize extra tuition for their kids, they are also accommodated and they are not left out because they can't afford that. So we are doing this in an effort to support those communities and households that cannot afford. And we are very grateful as a department to the way the SGPs have conducted these interviews. They have really considered our employment equity plan as a department, and we have seen a lot of appointments of women principals in a number of the schools. This year, the department is also piloting the online schooling program to support learners across the province who cannot access mainstream schooling. This is part of the e-learning strategy of the province to enable teaching and learning through available remote platforms. This is one of the projects that is designed to respond to the employment needs. In this regard, we have also appointed and recruited about 10 young graduates to teach learners, especially on the IT issues. The severe storms that occurred in 2021, December and January 2022, affected 103 schools in the province, most of them in the Matole West and OR Tambo coastal education districts. It will cost approximately 122.2 million to repair damages in these schools. And 32 of these schools have contractors on site already. We have managed to procure immediately and put those on site. And the remaining schools have been assessed and the procurement process is underway. It is estimated that it would take between 6 to 12 months to complete the required work on the schools. On fencing projects, there's a lot of work that is happening in this space. There are 6 projects that have been completed at the value of 11 million. 2 other projects are still under construction. The remainder of the 76 projects is estimated at 137.5 million and will be rolled out in this financial year. Planning is also underway for 120 schools to be rolled out in the latter part of the financial year. This is also going to unlock some of the challenges we've had on this issue here, fencing, but we have requested our infrastructure unit to ensure that by September we want to see all the contractors to install the fencing out there. On early childhood development, ladies and gentlemen, you all know that we have concluded the function shift between our Department of Social Development to the Department of Education. At the beginning of this financial year, 1st April, we have seen the movement of all those officials to the Department of Education, as well as the whole function to the Department of Education. You may be aware that as I indicated, that on the 1st of April we have assumed this responsibility of managing these centers. The department will also construct 2 new low-cost ECT centers in Amatole West as well as the OR Tambo, respectively. The plan also includes 18 maintenance projects on ECT centers at a cost of about 9.9 million. But we are working closely with the Department of Social Development to look at the SEs, but we are also working with the National Department to look at how we are going to take the early childhood development to greater heights, especially with effect from 2023 going forward, with a broader plan now to take early childhood development to greater heights.
On the online school, just to say that this is a pilot. We are piloting a concept called online school. So there are various categories of issues that we're trying to establish some concepts about with regard to online school. Actually, the first one is we are piloting the pedagogy of online teaching, which is almost like your distance education teaching. And we're looking at various formats that will fit the development levels of our learners in the Eastern Cape. Then the second one, we are piloting programming and scheduling of the online school, when, how, and we're looking at various mechanisms of looking at appropriate times for broadcasting as well as scheduling. Thirdly, we are also piloting the appropriateness of the infrastructure that is effective for an online school. Currently, we have infrastructure that we've been using to support teachers during COVID-19, but it will be a bit different when it comes to a direct teaching of learners, and where you want learners to respond on the spot, also give explanations.
Closure of schools, which we call rationalization of schools, particularly what is taking place in Tanzania. We do have a program, a structured program, which deals with reorganizing our schooling system. It's called rationalization. There is a process that we normally follow. When once the school is identified and it falls under the category of those schools that must close. There is a process of consultation with the communities, and we follow that process until a school is closed. And when once a school is closed, there is a process where the building, the infrastructure is handed over to the Department of Public Works, because all government buildings belong to the Department of Public Works. But we do that only in cases where we don't need that building, as the Department of Education, where we don't need it, not for any other purpose. But sometimes what happens, and I guess that this is what we are referring to, some parents, some communities, for various reasons, just decide on their own to take their children and place them somewhere else in alternative schools. And they do it without necessarily following the processes as prescribed in law. And in those cases, you will find empty buildings without the department knowing that children have actually moved somewhere else. But there is a follow-up process where we must actually follow all the necessary stages of closing a school. So in a nutshell, there is a structured program which is actually controlled and managed by the department.
On the scholar transport, just to say that there was a decision taken by Cabinet of the Eastern Cape government around 2010, 2011, that the function of running scholar transport should be shifted from education to the Department of Transport. Now, what it actually meant is that the Department of Transport was given a responsibility to design a public scholar transport, which is meant for children who are school-going age, and also contract service providers. The Department of Education then will manage the demand, and they'll also manage the supply. So manage applications, who's applying for scholar transport, and hand over all of that information to the Department of Transport. What then they do is to design the routes, then they design and make policies about what constitute a transport fit for children. They put in place monitoring mechanisms that children are transported in a legally suitable vehicle. They also have to look at scholar transport is transporting the right number of children, as per information provided by them. They have to make sure that the right learners are on the scholar transport. However, we work collaboratively because schools are ours and children are ours. So we have a structure that we've set up, which is an interdepartmental structure between ourselves and the Department of Transport, where we meet almost on a monthly basis to look at pressure points, where have numbers grown, because you'll find that there's quite a lot of movement, within the districts, something that we might call intra-district migration. So they almost sometimes destabilize your pattern of supply. So we have to sit and look at all of those dynamics. We also have children coming from outside the province, either Western Cape or Gauteng, so they put in a new pressure. So we're trying to manage all of those dynamics collaboratively between ourselves and the Department of Transport. So otherwise, the main responsibility lies with transport on contracting, but we are managing the request. The only big thing that is always a challenge with scholar transport is adherent to policy. What policy says is that you don't provide scholar transport where there are schools in a radius of 5 kilometers from where children are traveling. Now you get all sorts of requests that are outside the policy to say, well, it's not within the radius of 5 kilometers, but the area in which they are traveling is dangerous. There might be forest, there might be, so you do get these kinds of requests. Normally we'll think of those as an exception to the rule, And this is where at times you have to make sure that the request is genuine. But what it actually says, as they travel to their first school of choice, they must not go past a school in 5-kilometer radius. So that's what we're trying to manage, and that's what we're trying to deal with. The second issue that we're trying to regulate is the distance to the furthest school where they're traveling, because it's also useless to put them on a scholar transport when they have to travel in excess of 30 kilometers, because they will be tired and they'll wake up very early. So we're trying to make sure that per second, we rearrange and reorganize our schools in a way that will allow us to make scholar transport effective. So in short, we are responsible for also planning the makeup of our institutions, particularly looking at how schools can be of benefit to learners in proximity, but also we're trying to manage scholar transport where children are very far from the nearest school. And then the Department of Scholar Transport is designing and delivering that service on behalf of government of Eastern Cape.
On the second item on vandalism, this in our province happens at every school recess. Every time schools close, there are breakages in schools. In terms of the infrastructure, it has not been as pronounced as in other provinces where schools are actually gutted down we hear some of them by business persons who want to participate in the new contracts. But here the issue of vandalism is that it's the breakage of the entry areas to access the school nutrition, the equipment, and all those sorts. We have had assessed about 222 schools and found out that what is actually being stolen are the computers, the teaching and learning material, and everything else. But because schools get allocated a maintenance budget, they utilize that budget to fix the entry doors, the locks, but we also understand that the issue of security in terms of fencing, not all our schools in urban areas are fenced, and that's why there are these breakages. But the partnership we have on school safety with police stations on the patrol around the specific schools is what is in other areas working best. But we do note that this issue of vandalism cannot only remain as a function of the department because it's a societal matter. So those are some of the issues that we've been dealing with on the infrastructure space. We have projects, some of them major projects. You would have known of the new grants that we built up here, and this is making the facilities that are in town available for other schools to utilize those facilities. We've done extensive exercise to make sure that that facility is ready for use. So there are gains that we're doing, but we're also very clear that there are some constraints around the metro about the issue of where is the land to build for some of the schools that if you go at the bus and you think about in the next 5-10 years what will happen to that population, where would the school be for those kids that are around that area? And it becomes a nightmare in terms of planning. But we're working with the metro, the city, in making sure that we find a suitable land for building of schools where there is no land, and there is no land, and land belong to private persons. Thanks very much.
Education assistance on the EAs and the GAs. Indeed, there was a problem with their payment in the last quarter of the last financial year. I think around January, February, I think March. But we have since dealt with that aspect because it had to do with the system that was used to pay them. They were not paid through PESAL. And the process of transferring to a school had its own challenges. But the department has since sorted that out in April. And we are using a different system altogether now for the payment of the EAs for the current financial year. We have that provision to put temporary classrooms to relieve the pressure on the schools that are overcrowded. But we are also working on something that is also a cause for this. Besides just the migration from other areas to towns, but there's also migration from one school to the other school. due to sometimes the poor leadership in a particular school and therefore poor performance in that particular school. And there's migration. So we're looking at firming up the, mastering the appointment of right principals in schools. Because if you sort it out at that level, then you create stability in that school. And you improve performance just by providing quality leadership in a school. So that's what we are also working on, that one. And we have also started a process in this institute to train SMTs, to retrain SMTs, and also to ensure that all the new principals are inducted to manage not only just governance issues in a school, but to manage the delivery of the core business, which is teaching and learning, which we have picked up that in some of the schools that is poorly managed by principals and their deputy principals. So this is also what we are working on. We have those inductions and those training programs for SMTs, and they focus on both governance issues as well as the core business, which is the management of the curriculum delivered. That will then address this problem, yale migration, especially from one school to another school. The school autism. Other schools are going to be used, I think, to assist to blend circuits, because we have new districts with new circuits, and they need infrastructure, and there's no infrastructure. So we also want to use them for circuit offices and other things that are required at a circuit level. We also want to use these schools. We're of course working with Public Works to convert some of the schools to hostels, because already there are schools that have got intact infrastructure, but these are mega schools that are producing quality and all that, but they don't have hostels. And the issue of scholar transport is too costly, and it's not sustainable. And the only way of addressing that problem is to establish hostels. And one way of ensuring that we reduce the cost of doing these hostels is to convert in existing infrastructure, especially in schools that are closer to other schools. And then you can just have buses just moving these learners in the, from the hostel to that school that is just nearby. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. But on the side of Public Works has already issued a communique out even to other departments and to other stakeholders, either NGOs and other partners outside, for the effective utilization of the closed schools. Already Department of Transport is looking at utilizing those schools for their roads maintenance teams, so that they can use those, convert them, hostel-like for them, and so that they are closer to where they are going to be fixing the roads. That's one. Dr. Da is also looking at how they can also put some extension officers and other agricultural initiatives in those. So these are some of the initiatives that have been raised by some of the departments. There are also NGOs that are active in our rural areas. They don't have space to operate. They also showed interest in terms of utilizing this. But there are also other community initiatives that communities are interested in. But they need to talk to Department of Public Works. So Department of Public Works has been coordinating that. I don't know with the latest developments on their side in terms of that. But indeed, the question that you are raising is a very important question. We are very much concerned about it, because we have invested a lot of money in the infrastructure that we have put in the closed schools. And therefore, we cannot allow the vandalization of those schools, because at some point you are going to need that infrastructure in one way or the other.